All right, I don't want to waste your time. Let's get right into it today. Let's talk about training day versus non-training day macros, but do make sure you stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to let you know if it makes sense for you or not, and if you are going to use it, how big of a difference there should be. So the theory behind training day versus non-training day macros is during your training days, of course, you're going to be expending more energy and therefore you should consume more calories. So yeah, I can see the argument for it, but does it necessarily make sense for you? Well, as always, the answer always depends. Now, while it's true that you're going to burn more calories when you do your workouts, that doesn't necessarily mean it makes the most sense for you. And I think for the most part, it only makes sense to me for people who are more high performance athletes, maybe more physique competitors, people who are trying to do more extreme goals, who want to get every little tiny edge they possibly can, even if it's less than a 1% difference. If you're trying to get every little thing you can, it could make sense. However, that might not be you, probably isn't. And in that case, does it really make sense to move them around? I mean, you can, but to me, it doesn't really matter. As long as your total average for the week is the same, whether you eat more on one day and less on another day really isn't going to make a difference. Even if on one day you're slightly in a surplus and one day you're slightly in a deficit because of it, it's going to average out by the end of the week and make no difference. So say for instance, you're training 4 days per week, and on your 3 days of rest days, you're consuming 180 grams of protein, 250 carbs, and 65 grams of fat. And then on your 4 training days, you're consuming 180 protein, 290 carbs, and 70 grams of fat. When you average those days out by the end of the week, it's going to be around 2,420 calories. And do you really think it's going to make a big difference whether you average those 2,420 calories doing training day and non-training day macros versus just eating 2,420 calories every day, or going up and down based on your own personal hunger signals, any events you have coming up, some things you have planned, and working it out so that it averages the same by the end of the week? To me, I argue this is overkill for many people. Now, if you like it, or maybe you feel like your performance does better having those higher calorie days, then that's great. Do it. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying don't feel like you have to do it if it's not something you enjoy. And this is a big problem that people fall into all the time, just in general when it comes to fitness and getting results, is majoring in the minor, putting way too much attention in the tiny little details that are going to barely make any difference, if at all, without considering the biggest, most important things like your total calories, how much protein you're eating, how well you're adhering, and how sustainable it is. And if you don't like it, if it feels really tedious to have different macros on different days, then you're not likely to sustain it, and it just doesn't make sense. I've actually had people who've reached out and said that they had not only training day and non-training day, but they had upper body calorie days, lower body calorie days, rest calorie days, refeed calorie days. And it's like basically every day of the week they're eating something different and they're just going nuts. And I'm like, okay, let's get away from that and let's just focus on being more flexible, giving you a target for the week, and you can divvy it up how you want. If you want more calories one day, great. If you want less another day, great. If you enjoy having more on training days, that's fine. And if it's something that you're enjoying, you're just so much more likely to be able to not only adhere, but sustain it and therefore get better results, even if there's a tiny difference, what I'm not even sure there is, but if there's a small difference, is it really worth it if you're gonna hate every minute? We just gotta stop overcomplicating things, especially just for the average person who's just trying to get in shape. I think too often we look at people who are doing competitions and doing more extreme things and just taking that and just giving that same advice to the general population, and it just doesn't necessarily make sense. I mean, at the end of the day, it's always calories in versus calories out. It's being in a calorie deficit, which of course is complex. That's a topic for a different video, but we need to try to start simplifying things, not making it more complicated just to make it seem like it might be magical or work better. Now, along the same topic, there's refeed days that we can do too, and they can make sense, and typically I don't really care when they're consumed. I prefer more if there's a certain day of the week that you look forward to having more food that you enjoy, if it's a Saturday going out or a Friday or any day of the week, whatever day you look forward to, I would do your refeed on that day just for the mental benefits. Could you make some small arguments about certain days of the week with your training being more optimal to have more calories? Sure. And even then though, you can make arguments either direction. Like if you took your higher calorie days on a rest day, refilled your glycogen stores, and on that day you're refilling your glycogen stores for the following day that's more of a tougher day of training, you might go into that day better prepared, having more energy and ready to get after it versus saving it for that day when you're only going to be consuming part of your calories on that day, unless you just like to have a bigger carb meal prior to the workout because you feel like it helps you fuel that performance of the workout, then great, but there's going to be benefits either way. Now, let's just say you're going to do training day versus non-training day macros. You like it, you find it beneficial. how much more should you consume on your training days than you should on your rest days. Typically, I recommend about 30 to 40 more grams of carbs and also about 5 to 10 grams more of fat as well, because fat does aid in the digestion of those carbs and it does help with a little bit of flexibility as well. So that's going to be somewhere around 200 calories. So you don't need a ton of extra calories because you're training. It's just a little bit more for the calories you're going to expend during those days. But again, not at the sacrifice of your average for the week. Nothing matters more. I don't care what anybody else says. Also, with regards to refeeds, I do have a video if you want to know more about how to refeed that you can check out in this top video next. It will break down everything you need to know about them. Otherwise, I think you'll like this bottom video instead. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and I'll see you next time.